It's August 30th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with South Korea's national budget bill for next year. The $495 billion budget marks the country's smallest increase in almost 2 decades, reflecting the government's dedication to improving fiscal soundness amid declining tax revenue and economic uncertainties. The United States says it is still willing to sit down for talks with North Korea, even after the leader Kim Jong-un called out Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, referring to them as gang bosses. Wagner Group chief Yevgeny Prigozhin has been buried in a private funeral in his hometown of St. Petersburg, following a suspicious plane crash 2 months after his brief mutiny against the Kremlin. South Korea is tightening its belt more than ever, with its smallest on-year increase in nearly 20 years for the coming year's budget. Now, all to prioritize and focus on fiscal discipline. Our Shin Ha-young starts us off.
The government's budget proposal for 2024 was revealed following a cabinet meeting on Tuesday. For this year's budget, the Yoon administration focused on building a solid foundation for fiscal soundness. While continuing with this theme for next year's budget as well, it has also focused on improving the country's financial structure.
우리 정부는 경제 체질을 시장 중심 민간 주도로 바꿔 민간이 더 활발하게 투자하고 지출하고 일자리를 만들어내는데 역점을 둘 것입니다. 이를 위해 민간 투자를 저해하는 킬러 규제를 과감하게 철폐하고 민간의 자금이 흘러갈 수 있도록 금융 시스템을 정비할 것입니다.
In order to do so, South Korea will continue to tighten its belt. The government proposed a budget for next year of 656.9 trillion Korean won, or around $495 billion at the current rate. It's an increase of 2.8% from this year's budget, the smallest on-year increase since top-down budgeting was first introduced in 2005. Also, the government has gone through major spending reforms in order to secure an extra $17 billion of funds for use in the budget. The centerpiece of the bill is some $14.6 billion allocated to bolster the welfare system for the socially vulnerable. This includes increasing the maximum basic living allowance for low-income families to approximately $1,400 per month. That's $160 more compared to this year and more than the total increase implemented by the previous administration. As a response to the aging society issue, the government has increased the number of jobs for seniors to 1 million, which is approximately 10% of the elderly population and marks a record high increase of 147,000. It has also increased senior employment allowances by 7%. Those allowances have been frozen since 2018. Tackling the country's low birth rate, parents with newborns will be eligible for up to 1 million won, or around $750 per month, in parental allowance beginning next year. Also, to achieve a balance between work and childcare, the period of paid childcare leave will be extended for the first time since 1995 from 12 months to 18 months. Next year's budget has also been designed to manage the increase in government debt by reducing expenditure growth.
Despite a decline in tax revenue, we mitigated the deterioration of the fiscal balance for the upcoming year by curbing the growth rate of total expenditure. We have also managed to control the increase in national debt, keeping it at its lowest level since 2019 at 61.8 trillion won, as part of efforts to establish a solid foundation for fiscal soundness.
With next year's budget, South Korea's budget deficit to GDP ratio is forecast to be at 1.9%, worsening by 1.3 percentage points from this year. The total national debt to GDP ratio is expected to be 51% next year, up 0.6 percentage points from this year. The government will submit the final bill to the National Assembly on September 1st, and the legal deadline for the National Assembly to pass the budget is December 2nd. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Despite North Korean leader Kim Jong-un referring to the leaders of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan as gang bosses, Washington says it remains open to holding dialogue with the reclusive state. Our Lee Seung-ja has more.
Earlier this week, North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported that its leader Kim Jong-un slammed the leaders of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, calling them gang bosses for agreeing to regularize their joint military exercises. However, despite Kim's comments, Washington says it remains open to dialogue with Pyongyang. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said Tuesday that the U.S. has said on many occasions that they're open to dialogue with the reclusive state, and it remains true even now. Despite the U.S.'s openness to hold talks with Pyongyang, South Korean ambassador to the United States, Cho Yeon-dong, said Tuesday during a forum hosted by the Washington-based Center for Strategic and International Studies that the opportunity for reopening dialogue with North Korea is not likely for the time being. Cho also reiterated South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's stance that the continued provocations from Pyongyang will only strengthen the trilateral security cooperation between the three countries. Meanwhile, during the same event, the U.S. National Security Council Coordinator for Indo-Pacific Affairs, Kurt Campbell, highlighted the three allies' commitment to institutionalizing their three-way cooperation. Campbell stressed that what was seen in the Camp David summit was a sense of three equal, powerful, committed, determined nations meeting on equal terms, noting that no country is weaker or stronger in the alliance. However, he also said the trilateral cooperation cannot be future-proof, given the historical differences between South Korea and Japan being the major source of conflict between the two neighboring countries. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo says American companies are complaining that China has become uninvestable due to being too risky. The Commerce Secretary's comments came on Tuesday as her delegation left for Shanghai after holding talks with officials in Beijing in an attempt to normalize economic ties with China. She said U.S. companies have pointed to fines, raids, and other measures that have made it risky to do business there. She added that there have been no rationale given for Beijing's ban imposed earlier this year on American chipmaker Micron Technology, citing the challenges American companies are now facing in China. The 11-day South Korea-U.S. joint military Ulchi Freedom Shield drills come to an end tomorrow. And for the past couple of days, special forces have been out in the ocean to master techniques for maritime infiltration. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung has this report.
Special operations forces from South Korea and the U.S. head toward the shore on rubber boats, keeping their positions low. A number of the Special Forces personnel swim the rest of the way, cautiously making sure it's safe for the rest of the team to arrive. This is a glimpse of the combined training that Seoul and Washington do on a daily basis to infiltrate the enemy's base. Since last week in Yangyang County, Gangwon-do Province, around 100 personnel from South Korea's Army and U.S. Special Operations Command Korea have been conducting field training exercises to enhance skills in maritime infiltration. The training is part of the Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise, which runs until Thursday. This combined special operation is aimed at strengthening Seoul and Washington's interoperability.
Combined special operations capabilities could be further strengthened by mastering various tasks with the U.S. Special Operations Command Korea. We will continue to train and establish a perfect readiness so that we can accomplish any mission in case of emergency.
Seoul and Washington Special Forces master maritime infiltration techniques, including special strike operations and close combat techniques. The U.S. Captain Jay said the training is also focused on building the skills of leaders at every level, noting it as being the most important resource. He also underlined strong teamwork with South Korean forces.
For 70 years, American and Korean soldiers have stood shoulder to shoulder, dedicated to the defense of our homelands. Our ironclad alliance is integrated at every level, from the strategic to the tactical. I am proud to work with my Korean brothers. 같이 갑시다, 필승.
Going forward, Seoul and Washington Special Forces vow to prepare for every scenario on air, land, and sea.
U.S. Korea! We are together!
Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Following Japan's Fukushima wastewater release, tensions between China and Japan are heating up, to a point where Tokyo is hinting that it'll file a complaint to the World Trade Organization against Beijing's seafood import bans. Lee Kyung-eun reports.
Beijing's decision to ban all its seafood imports from Japan has prompted Tokyo to threaten to take Beijing to the World Trade Organization in order to seek a reversal. Japan's Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi on Tuesday said that Japan will take necessary action under various routes, including the WTO framework. On the same day, Beijing's Foreign Ministry spokesperson urged Japan to take concrete action.
In response to the Japanese side's extremely selfish and irresponsible wrong action, China and other parties at stake have the right and responsibility to take legitimate, reasonable and necessary precautionary measures to safeguard marine environment safety, food security and people's health.
In China, demand for seafood already appears to be falling, putting those in the fishing industry in a tough situation. Outraged Chinese citizens have been dialing the numbers of Japanese businesses and institutions to complain about the release. In the 4 days following the start of the discharge, more than 6,000 calls were made to the Tokyo Electric Power Company, while 220 calls were made to police stations across Japan. Japan has also reportedly made phone calls with complaints to the Chinese embassy and consulates, something the Chinese embassy says seriously disrupts the normal operation of their offices. Flights to Japan from China have decreased by a third over the past week, and more people with flights booked are demanding refunds. According to Japanese media outlets, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida will likely address the issue at the ASEAN meeting and G20 summit next month. There, he is expected to engage in dialogue with participating countries and reiterate that the wastewater discharge meets international safety standards. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
So we're nearly into a week since Japan started to release the Fukushima wastewater into the Pacific Ocean. How has the process for this 30-year-long project been for the past week? For more, we're joined by Stephen Barwick this morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
So Stephen, how is the process going so far? I mean, what's it looking like at the moment?
By all indications, things are going kind of according to plan. The South Korean government has their own, I think it's 4 spots in Korean waters where they're assessing the levels of elements such as tritium. And they said yesterday that they've not, according to their measurements, everything are within safe levels. That's not surprising. We should keep in mind that Fukushima is still fairly far away from the Korean peninsula, and this water release only just started about a week ago. So the Japanese government is also maintaining a website where they're providing some kind of frequently updated information with diagrams and numerical readings of the different elements. So things seem to be going as planned, but as the previous news stories have shown, a lot of this is about perception. A lot of this is about how people feel about Japan's decision to do this. So we've not been able to come up with any kind of real scientific basis for criticizing this. Right now, I think things are more at the level of rhetoric and perhaps emotion, but this is definitely something that's going to be an issue of regional concern for a while going forward.
Right. We are only a week into the process. Like you said, it's a 30-year-long process. So still in early stages to really evaluate the scientific side of it. Our Lee Kyung-eun reported earlier that tensions are rising between Japan and China over the wastewater release. Stephen, what's really happening?
Well, I'm not on the ground in China, but there just seems to be, we need to keep in mind that these are 2 countries that have a long history of antagonism, and there just seems to be quite a lot of public discontent in China about the decision by Japan to do this, both on the levels of governments and among the public. There's stories in the Chinese and international media about how people online in China are expressing displeasure with this and are making these harassing phone calls to various Japanese institutions. I can't really speak to, exactly what things are like in China now, but I would just draw attention to, perhaps people in China feel as though Japan went ahead with this without directly consulting the Chinese government, or perhaps people in China feel as though, particularly people who rely on the ocean, who rely on kind of the seafood industry, maybe they feel as though even if Japan is doing this within safe international standards, they might feel like due to the perception of seafood and due to the perception that this water could possibly be dangerous, that their livelihoods are being affected in a way that they had no say in. So I guess there is some frustration there. The task will then go to perhaps the leaders of the country to maybe try to talk this out, to maybe try to calm the situation down.
Right. Similar tensions, or rather I would say concerns, are also rising here in the country. That's why the government is conducting a 100-day intensive inspection into seafood imports because of the Fukushima concerns. Now, do you think it'll actually help tame those fears?
I mean, I think it can only help. At the very least, the government is, I think, showing the Korean public that they're taking this seriously and that they're mobilizing resources to deal with this. They are not simply relying entirely on the word of Japan or the International Atomic Energy Agency. They've allocated their own resources to this, and they are taking at least some kind of preventative steps. So I think that's prudent. We're early in the game, and I would be very surprised if shipments coming out of the ocean now displayed any sign of increased radiation. You'd have to ask a scientist about, the real potential for risk here. Like, I've read testimonies by scientists on this issue who kind of giggle about the suggestion that any of this could be dangerous. They say that these seafood now would be carrying just very standard and very predictable levels of radiation. There's nothing for anybody to worry about. But just on an optical level, and just in terms of attempting to allay concerns among the Korean public, I think it makes sense for the Korean government to kind of attack this head on and to show that they are providing, not only relying on outside assessments, but attempting to have their own kind of objective assessment. I think that makes sense.
Right. And as a correspondent yourself, how seriously do you think South Korea is taking or coping with this whole Fukushima release project?
I mean, I do think that the Yoon government is taking this seriously. I think President Yoon is in a bit of a challenging scenario in that he has invested quite a lot of political capital in improving ties with Japan. And so he's got a kind of difficult balance to strike where he has to be very mindful about the fears of the Korean public. And you can see that he's doing that in that he has maintained South Korea's ban on seafood imports from this Fukushima area. He has, at the very least, acknowledged that there is a potential kind of risk there, or that the public opinion surrounding that issue is just kind of too volatile to touch. So I think for a number of reasons, he's taking it very seriously. Time will tell, and hopefully we'll get more and more data as things go ahead that we can base our decisions when it comes to this on real scientific information. And hopefully over the coming weeks and months, we'll get a clearer sense of just what, if any, kind of public health risks this poses, and we'll be able to craft policies and craft our responses based on that. But just in the meantime, it does seem to me like President Yoon and his administration are taking this issue pretty seriously.
Right. That's why the government announced yesterday that it's allocating over $560 million US dollars for Fukushima-related matters to really get through and overcome those fears and challenges.
Yes, it remains to be seen exactly where that money will go. But yeah, I do think that Yoon has, I think that just part of what makes this challenging in Korea is that seafood is such a huge part of the diet. I mean, almost every meal is served with some kind of fish, or fish is used as seasoning and in sauces. And that's just a really kind of core part of the Korean diet. So I do think that Yoon has ample reason to want to assure the Korean public, and I think he's done something wise by mobilizing at least some of this country's very robust scientific infrastructure. South Korea employs a lot of scientists, has a lot of research institutes, a lot of universities. So I do think the infrastructure is in place to deal with this soundly.
All right, Stephen, thanks so much for joining us this morning. You have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Russia, where Wagner mercenary group chief Yevgeny Prigozhin was buried in a private funeral. Now, the ceremony in his hometown of St. Petersburg on Tuesday was carried out without military honors. This despite Prigozhin being given Russia's highest military award, the Hero of Russia, for leading Wagner forces in Ukraine. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin also did not attend, with a Kremlin spokesperson saying that Putin's presence there was not envisaged. Prigozhin was among 10 people who died in a plane crash last Wednesday. Other prominent members of the Wagner Group also died in the crash and were buried in separate funerals on the same day. Now, the plane crash came 2 months after Prigozhin led a failed mutiny against the Russian army's top brass. Washington has suggested that Putin may be behind the fatal crash, but Putin denies any involvement. Now, the U.S. state of Florida is bracing for what is being described as an unprecedented storm. Hurricane Idalia is set to make landfall on Wednesday morning, local time. Evacuation orders have been issued for at least 28 of Florida's 67 counties. Over 5,000 members of the National Guard have also been put on standby. Forecasts warn of strong winds, up to 30 centimeters of rain, and storm surges of potentially more than 4 meters in some parts. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis warned that the Big Bend area, where the hurricane is expected to hit, hasn't seen a storm this size since the 1800s. Idalia is currently a Category 2 hurricane, but is expected to reach Category 3 before making landfall. Now, 1,300 schools have been destroyed and others damaged in Ukraine since Russia's invasion in February 2022. That's according to a UNICEF press release on Tuesday. It added that only a third of school-aged children in the country are going to classes in person. Meanwhile, over half of Ukrainian refugee children living across 7 host countries are not going to school due to language barriers, lack of school access, and burdened education systems. In Ukraine, many schools have suffered direct missile and artillery hits in the 18 months of war, while others have been shut down as a precautionary measure. UNICEF also noted that Ukrainian children have experienced 4 years of education disruption, as the start of the war was preceded by the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, in a world first, a live worm was pulled from the brain of an Australian woman. In an operation in June 2022, surgeons found the roundworm, which had grown to 8 centimeters long. It was removed from a 64-year-old from New South Wales who had been suffering symptoms since January 2021. The roundworm is usually found in pythons. The patient likely became infected after collecting and eating wildgrass. The case was documented in September's Emerging Infectious Diseases Journal.
Good morning. It's another rainy start to the day for southern parts of the country. They have been dealing with downpours. Parts of Gyeongsang-do provinces are seeing 40 millimeters of hour of rainfall, drenching down the area. And Jeju is also being drenched with heavy showers. And these thick rain clouds will dominate southern parts of the country all day today and into tomorrow. Heavy rain warnings have been issued for the east of Jeollanam-do and west of Gyeongsang-nam-do provinces and mountainous regions on Jeju Island, and parts of Jeju and west of Gyeongsang-do provinces are under heavy rain advisories this morning. In fact, Gyeongsang-do provinces and nearby areas will be hit the hardest by downpours. Jeju and Jeollado provinces could see more than 120 millimeters of downpours into Thursday. We had cooler overnight temperatures in the capital. Afternoon highs will be similar to yesterday in Seoul, but southern regions will have highs that are 1 to 4 degrees lower this afternoon. Sorry for those taking a late summer vacation. You need to take the weather into account and stay away from the water if you're traveling to the south and Jeju Island. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Thursday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.
Welcome. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
loved and watched around the world. We want to make more animations to reach more children. Traveling time and space. Developing adventure and curiosity. Infinite creativity and hope. We want our children to grow up to be happy. K-animation, watched by children all around the world. So that joy can be felt when our animation is watched. This is the reason we make animation and share with the world. K-animation, befriending children all over the world.
Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's August 30th here in Seoul. I'm Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Cheska Dainong.
Happy Wednesday, everyone.
Happy Wednesday, and Yoon.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. President Yoon on Tuesday said he would bump up soldiers' monthly salary by an extra $264, so that by the year 2025, their monthly salary reaches around $1,580. Leading up to his election, President Yoon tried his best to make sure that the monthly wage of conscripted soldiers goes up to better motivate them and improve their working conditions. Moving on to our second story. 500 schools nationwide are poised to designate September 4th as a discretionary holiday, but some officials from the Education Ministry and some parents are against this measure, mainly because they're worried that it will cause confusion for working parents, as they would have to look for sitters that day. The reason why teachers are calling for a day off on September 4th is because it's the 49th day since a young teacher in her 20s ended her own life in an elementary school classroom. Under Buddhist traditions, a total of 49 days is used to mourn one's death, and then on day 50, they hope for rebirth. Now, from this week, Korean Air has decided to weigh some of its passengers anonymously. The airline will then share this data with the country's Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, and it's not the first time an airline has asked passengers to go atop the weighing scales. Earlier this year, Air New Zealand had a similar policy for customers flying its international routes. This is just a way airlines better determine how much fuel they need and how they can distribute weight on board. And passengers will be asked to weigh their body weight and also with their luggage. A passenger can refuse to have his or her weight data collected, and some opinion surrounding this issue is that this measure could be quite embarrassing. It could easily cause body shaming, and I would like to ask our panelists what they think about that. What do you think about this issue?
Well, obviously for some passengers, it could be a very sensitive issue, revealing their weight in front of everyone, even though it's like anonymous. But still, we have to know that the purpose of conducting passenger weight measurements is to reduce additional fuel consumption. And apparently, you know, it could potentially lead to saving up to $1 billion annually. And that's a big amount. So for passengers, I mean, we can choose not to get weighed, so it's totally up to us. Also, the US Federal Aviation Administration, they recommend that 88.4 kilograms for adult males, 70.3 kilograms for adult females. So now, if you weigh more than these set standards, I think maybe it could be a friendly reminder for you to kind of be a bit more health conscious and just watch your weight, because at the end of the day, you know, when you do travel, you want to make the most of your trip, and being overweight obviously is not going to help that fun trip. So I think if you're a little overweight, maybe now is a good time to lose weight.
And you know what? I'm actually quite relieved to hear that you can also weigh yourself with the luggage, because you can blame your luggage too.
Take more luggage.
You could be like, oh, it's not me, it's actually
my luggage is extremely heavy.
It's extremely heavy. Yeah. What about you, Jessica? What do you think about
I mean, I do agree with Yoon on the fact that I think it's, you know, it could cause a little bit of controversy around body shaming, but I think what's more important than the body shaming is how discreet the airline performs these measurements. Because I mean, we've all had those experiences where we're called aside, you know, in the airport by the TSA or security, and it's, even though we didn't do anything wrong, it's kind of embarrassing. So I don't want the airline security yelling out, oh, 53.8 all across, you know, the airport lounge.
Minus the luggage.
Minus the luggage.
Without the luggage. But another thing that raises my curiosity is, you know, if we're not measuring everyone, would just this random sampling really contribute to fuel conservation? Because there might be people who weigh under than the average or way more than the average. So I'm also curious as to, I guess, the effectiveness of these random sampling and how much fuel it can really save. So we're not measuring everyone.
If they're going to weigh everyone, they should weigh everyone, right?
I think so.
To make it more clear.
Yeah.
Oh, but I'm not sure. I like the fact that I can choose not to be weighed, especially because sometimes I might feel a bit bloated and I don't want to be on that scale.
And they better not scream your weight across the
I know, they better not.
Airport security.
But at the same time, I do understand like the effectiveness that it could get. Like, it's all about safety, so I do want to be safe on my plane.
And how are they going to select people, you know?
That's also true.
You know, we've heard about like profiling and you know, screening, not only at the airports, but you know, random security checks. So I would feel slightly attacked if I'm selected from the group.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, what's the standard?
What do I have that makes me stand out? But because this measure has taken off, if any of our viewers do experience this, please let us know down in the comments and share your experience. And that was our news feed for this Wednesday. Let's now head into our discussion topic of the day. We're just coming back, moving on to our discussion topic of the day, that is. Many things change from generation to generation, including perceptions of beauty and how we promote it. Take a look at the screen to find out a bit more on what we'll be discussing today. How would you define beauty? Given that it's such a subjective concept, people seem to have distinct definitions of beauty, especially in the age we're living in, where we try to accept as much diversity as possible. But the concept of beauty doesn't seem to have evolved too much here. At beauty pageants, where contestants try to tick as many boxes that prove how attractive they are. For years, these beauty contests have been controversial. Critics say these types of contests are backwards in a world where feminist ideas are gaining momentum. They say pageants are harmful and promote body disorder and dysmorphia. Others say pageants could do just the opposite. It could help contestants gain confidence, not to mention bringing financial benefits. We're just coming back from this year's Miss Universe Korea finals. On Sunday, Seoul crowned their finalists who will be heading to El Salvador in November for the global beauty pageant. And this year marks the 72nd Miss Universe contest, so it's the oldest and most watched beauty pageant in the world. But throughout recent years, some people have been demanding that beauty pageants like this be canceled. Why so, and what do you guys have to say on this question?
You know, I think it is definitely a great topic because it is somewhat, you know, heated debate among people because, I mean, let's face it, beauty pageant is the standardized judgment of beauty and it has a very long legacy, right? Historically, it has been around the world and many female figures have competed in it. Like, I was surprised Oprah Winfrey also competed.
Really?
Yes, she did.
Oh, wow.
And Diane Sawyer, like the anchor, and an Oscar winner, Michelle Yeoh. So there have definitely been a history. But on top of the history and the legacy that it has, there have been controversies surrounding, you know, maybe promoting a standardized beauty, and there have been Korean controversies like plastic surgery, you know, the credentials of the participants, and what is really the standard or criteria for, you know, I guess labeling someone as beautiful or more beautiful than someone else.
Especially when the generation now is saying that beauty can come from anyone, it can come from within. There's so much diversity in terms of beauty.
Absolutely.
So that concept of standardized beauty doesn't seem to mesh along with what we're looking for.
Right.
Now, what about you, Yoon? How would you answer this question on why a lot of people are saying we should cancel beauty pageants in general?
Right, so to talk a bit more about the downsides, like these kind of beauty contests, they kind of give the wrong influence to the society, especially among the younger generation girls. It basically just sends this blunt message saying to be accepted in society, you have to be perfect and pretty.
Right.
And that conception is kind of like they put more focus on their outward appearance rather than the inner skills and the inner beauty and education, and the list goes on. So I think it also, like what Cheska just said, promotes plastic surgery.
Right.
Because obviously you need to appeal to the judges, and to do so, obviously you may have to go under the knife, spend a lot of money on hair and makeup, like Botox injections, fake teeth, and the list goes on. So I think...
I mean, there's a whole industry, I think, that circulates around
dedicated just
the
for
beauty
that.
pageants.
There's a separate market for that
There
as well
is,
every year. That's how they make their money. So I think these kind of contests ultimately distort the true meaning of beauty and cause many young girls to kind of lose confidence as well, and just lower their self-esteem because they kind of like take in the wrong impression of what it means to be really attractive.
Right. It's quite upsetting to hear that, but what does the Korean public in specific have to say about beauty pageants then?
I know I was also very interested to hear about our South Korea's opinion because, you know, South Korea has a heavy emphasis on appearance and how we present ourselves.
For sure.
So let's take a look at the screen to find out. So in this survey, when asked about South Korea's opinion about the beauty pageant, almost half of the people said it should be removed or cancelled out. Now, I think about half of the people said, well, it's okay to have it kept. And I too agree it is a very sensitive issue. And like Yoon said, if it really crosses the line, it can become a competition to objectify women purely based on their looks, you know, which could prompt our culture to be more heavily based on looks only, leading to heavy conformity and even, you know, obsessions and unhealthy diet to fit into this standardized beauty itself.
But it's quite interesting that it's a half and half, so it's quite controversial.
It is very controversial.
But Yoon, to what I know, beauty pageants in Korea have long been considered a prerequisite for a celebrity to debut, right? It's like one of the first steps you can go for in order to be famous. Now, could you walk us through the unique aspects of beauty contests held here in Korea?
Right, the most common one that we know in Korea is the Miss Korea pageant. Where like we still see a lot of female celebrities and actresses on TV, even as of today, that have some sort of experience of, you know, being in one of these contests and actually, you know, being crowned the top prize as well. And back then, because we didn't have like so much media, we only had TV to really appeal to the public.
Advertisers.
Right. So like the young girls who wanted to be on TV, become like celebrities, they would have to go into this contest because this was their only way to really, you know, show themselves to the public. And it was like back in the day, even today, like if you, as a woman, if you say, oh, I used to be like part of the Miss Korea, not Miss Korea, like Miss Korea pageant, in what year, whatever, they'll think, oh, that's why you're so pretty.
I know.
You know? So, like, they had that really good image of, you know, oh, being pretty just means, you know, you've definitely been in one of these contests. So I think in Korea, it means a lot to a lot of celebrities. Back in the day, they had to go through this kind of contest to be a TV star.
But nowadays, I think we mentioned during our rehearsal that we're seeing so much social media and different outlets where you can promote yourself. So maybe that's why we're seeing a controversy as to why these beauty pageants are even still here when standardized beauty doesn't seem to be the norm, right? But to further analyze what our generation, specifically millennials and Gen Z, think about these beauty pageants, I'd like to ask you guys what your thoughts are.
You know, I think many MZers, including myself, have a different perception of beauty nowadays because we have so many different outlets and like we're exposed to so many different media, social platforms and whatnot. So I think, and also that concept of, you know, women, they have built this image of in society where they're very capable people. You know, they have the potential as much as men, if not even more, to become global leaders. So I think our concept of, you know, beautiful is not just about the appearance; it's also about like how smart you are, how educated you are.
How eloquent you are.
Exactly, so that's where I think more MZers try to put more focus on these days.
Yeah, what about you, Cheska?
I think today's topic is very interesting because I think I can lend a very interesting perspective having competed in one of the global beauty pageants.
Oh, really?
Yes, and my purpose and reason for competing, you might, hopefully, find it rather interesting. And it was really to sort of challenge myself in ways that I have not before because I think even as young girls, girls and women, we are never taught on how to be truly beautiful, right? It's either focused too much on the external beauty or too much on the hard work and, the hustle culture.
Right.
And I think I sort of threw myself into this challenge to sort of expand myself and learn, how can I perform under pressure or the judgment from people who are purely or looking at me based on the looks. And fortunately, and very interesting enough, at least Miss World when I competed, they, one, got rid of the bikini competition, which I was very happy about. Two, there was no limitation on height or weight, and I didn't even have to spend a single dime to compete or apply. Everything was sponsored, and we did a lot of volunteering. So it really taught me this idea of like, okay, beauty can have a very diverse and global meaning just beyond physical appearance. Now, if every beauty competition really focused on that,
that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
then I think it would be a very ideal world. But it was a good experience for me to see like both worlds, coming from, kind of an academic background.
And I really respect and admire what you took away from that experience. And hopefully those beauty pageant contestants out there could, use yourself as like an exemplary example on which direction they should go.
I would be honored, yeah.
But in the meantime, we also asked what our viewers think about beauty pageants in general. So here's what 3 of them had to say. Take a look at the screen to find out. Let's start with Sunshine Dessert. She said the question should be directed at the girls and women who take part, asking why they do it and do they enjoy it. The reason I say this is there are groups worldwide who think it's against a woman's will and show them in a bad light. Gwen says, I used to compete in this small town Christmas beauty pageant from 2016 to 19, and it was only about $30 to $40, and I had lots of fun. I'd like to be in one at least one more time, but only for fun. I don't care about competition. No Name said, beauty pageants can be inspiring when people showcase their confidence and elegance. It's important to celebrate and appreciate a diverse range of perspectives to truly embrace the beauty in everyone. So thank you so much to our global viewers who gave their different insights on what they think about beauty pageants. But I would now like to hear from someone who's actually contested in these pageants abroad to get more of a global perspective. Let's include her in our talks right after this. Let's hear from an actual beauty pageant contestant. She's Miss World Singapore from 2013. It's Rachel Ling. Welcome, Rachel.
Hi, thank you for having me.
All right, so Rachel, you were Miss World Singapore in 2013. Why did you decide to participate in that specific contest?
So my reason to participate and my journey to joining the Miss Singapore World Pageant was perhaps unique compared to the other contestants in my cohort. Although I'm a Singaporean citizen, I left Singapore at a young age and lived in various other countries for most of my life, including in South Korea. So the year I participated in the pageant just happened to coincide with my university summer holidays. And I saw it as an opportunity to kind of reconnect with my home country. And also, like what Cheska said, in a way to challenge myself to do something different and hopefully also make some new friends.
And Rachel, I mean, we're alums, and I know we both come from an academic background. Did you have any expectations going in, and how would you describe your experience actually competing in the pageant?
So I don't really know if I particularly had any expectations per se, because I went in with quite an open mind. And overall, I would say my experience was quite worthwhile. Like you mentioned, coming from a more academic background as a university scholar at the time, participating in the pageant allowed me to gain exposure to a completely different industry and completely new environment, from which I actually realized now in hindsight that I learned a lot. So as a little girl, I think I remember watching pageants on TV with my family and kind of being curious about what it would be like to be on that stage. And I think many young people, both girls and boys, do have that kind of curiosity about the pageant world. So my pageant experience was eye-opening in that regard and provided me with a platform, both directly and indirectly, to meet diverse people from all walks of life, many of whom are still good friends today.
Rachel, you heard the prevailing arguments against pageants from our panelists. What do you think about them?
So it's kind of touchy and controversial topic, isn't it? I agree to some extent that pageants could sometimes objectify women based on outer appearances, but I don't believe that this issue is isolated only to beauty pageants, and it also really depends on, the kind of beauty pageant and the organizers of that beauty pageants, because nowadays there are just so many beauty pageants all around the world. But in my opinion, the bigger social challenge that we all face in the digital world is really the proliferation of social media and mass media, which kind of flood us with images that are often unrealistic and superficial, and that can have a damaging impact on body image and self-confidence. So it's the pursuit of these kind of popular social media aesthetic of the times that is perhaps more concerning from my view. Beauty pageants, I think, can still provide a platform for women to be seen and heard, and also offer opportunities for young women to gain confidence, feel empowered, and advance their careers if done correctly or with the right approach and attitude. So ultimately, I do agree that some critics would probably say that beauty pageants are kind of an outdated relic of patriarchal society that values women for their beauty. But on the other hand, many supporters would probably also argue that these pageants and the stage can be a powerful platform for showcasing women's empowerment, diversity, intelligence, and leadership.
Right,
so,
but in order for us to uphold feminist values and what you also mentioned, what critics say is a traditional and patriarchal relic, what should be done? Like, what is one suggestion that you would give for beauty pageants to go on from now?
So, many beauty pageants have their founding mission or do their PR based on the fact that they are trying to enable women to hone both their inner and outer beauty. But however, the reality is that there is still a partiality to focusing on appearances due to the fact that it is still show business. And so, there is still that, emphasis on what looks good on camera. So of course, the most natural response that probably is the main argument is that it would be more important for many beauty pageants to focus more on inner beauty, personality, leadership, and other talents of the contestants. So I would personally like to see more beauty pageants offer the prize money as a form of scholarship, and also more kind of support programs for girls after the contest to continue their personal and professional development. As someone who has been through a pageant and who has many friends who have been in the pageant world, we go through this kind of journey together on the stage and through the contest. But right now, there are many former beauty queens who have become, business leaders, successful entrepreneurs, and great role models. But there are not so much of a community or ongoing support once the main event and once the contest is over. And that's kind of what I would like to see develop further in beauty pageants in the future.
All right, and in order for that to be done, the premise is expanding the definition of beauty. Thank you so much, Rachel. It was a pleasure to hear from you today.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
All right, and the last takeaway I got was expanding the concept of beauty and allowing the people that are participating, or not even participating, but looking at these beauty pageants, be a part of that community where they can explore what types of beauty they can do, whether that's inner or outer. I think that's really important.
I even love the suggestion about scholarship, because I think, the scholarship for academic and professional, sponsorship would really enhance the quality of the beauty pageant and really show that beauty is not just limited to appearance.
It's mental beauty.
Right, and professional beauty.
Yes. What about you, Keegan?
Agree with both Rachel and Cheska, and what you said. I don't want this, pageant to stop anything, but if they head towards the right direction, I think everyone will benefit from it, and the standardization of beauty will actually, be in a more positive light. So I'm all for pageants to continue. Yeah.
All right, and we'll have to see what happens from this day on forth. And we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Cheska Dainha.
Pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
And Park Ki-hoon.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.
아름다운 건
Welcome.